transferred over. Okay, welcome to the call. Consensus layer call 84. The first half, or really however long we need, will be dedicated to Kiln, merge, etc., etc. Then if any client updates people would like to share, research spec, etc., I can give you all an update on the withdrawals stuff that we've been working on, maybe some other stuff, and close from there. So on Kiln, I believe that many of you attended the call on Monday, which is kind of a testing and security related call as we lead up into the merge. The major sentiment from that is this is super critical at this phase for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, and beyond the next 3 or 4 weeks, really, we need to prove to ourselves that we are ready. And so that it involves productionizing, obviously, but also involves a lot of the shared testing efforts. So if you don't have anyone on your team that is involved in that or taking a look at Hive or digging into kurtosis or following along, I would suggest that we do that. Perry.
And following along. And
what?
Looking into Hive.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's a shared effort. There's some people that are carrying that on their shoulders, and the more hands we can get in that, I think the better. Perry, do we have a shadow fork?
Yes, so the shadow fork configs have been released and the nodes are up and running. I think we hit TTD in another hour or something like that. We're like about 200, 300 blocks away, I guess.
Nice. And are you're running all of the nodes this time?
Yeah, at the moment, I think it's just me.
Nice. And is there any way to follow along?
Yes, I can link some Explorer links. There's no landing page this time because it isn't really a public thing. But one thing to note is we're following mainnet distribution now. So there's setting 60-something% Prism, 20-something, 15%, whatever. I just looked at one of the recent reports and then split them up accordingly.
Right. Cool. Great.
So which execution layer clients are you running? And how are they split?
Currently, Gurley, Nethermind, and Bezu. And I've also tried to follow mainnet split. So I just multiplied the 2 splits. So if it's 80% gets and 60% Prism, then I just multiply the 2 and whatever number results in that is how many get clients that exist.
Cool. Great. So this is shadow forking Gorley. Ideally, the transition goes out without a hitch. We're following a number of metrics, and the transactions will be piped into it, so we'll have some organic activity. Is the base fee on Gorley above 255? Does anybody know?
I'm looking now, but I doubt it. Oh, base fee is 9 away. So what we can do, if somebody wants to, when would we want to spam Gordy? So I can, I guess Perry has a ton of ETH as well, but like we could spam Gordy either during or before or after the transition. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, leading into it and right after would be, I think, the most interesting spot.
Yeah.
But any place in there. I mean, the Prism bug would be caught at any time the base fee exceeds 255.
Right.
That style of bug. But there's any number of other bugs that might show up.
Yeah. So we say basically in the next hour is when we expect this to happen.
Yeah, I can just redo the math, but I think it should be in the next hour.
Cool. Is it easy to start a transaction buzzer or spammer now, or?
I can start one, yes. I might need some more funds, but I'll ping you if
Okay.
I need more.
Okay, I'll
Sweet.
send you some. Don't lose them.
You're never
And
gonna
so
live that one down. Sorry, Ben. What was that?
don't sell them.
Yeah. There is a Gorley ETH proposal right now to fork like 10 trillion ETH into it, so that the signal about buying Gorley ETH goes away. But that's another conversation. Okay, and then there was some discussion around doing either another shadow fork or stepping up and shadow forking mainnet, but to do a bit more of an all hands. Have more people involved, actually watch it, make sure it goes well, triage it if there are issues. Perry or Tim, is this just an idea at this point, or is there a plan here?
At least the current plan for this is that we do the mainnet shadow fork 2 weeks from now. So we wanted to do DevNet 6 next week. And then based on how the Gurley shadow fork goes plus DevNet 6, then we would discuss the mainnet shadow fork the week after.
Okay, and DevNet 6 would be a bit more participatory, rather than...
Yeah, whoever would want to join can join that.
Okay, cool. And we'd maybe not write a blog post, but we would invite even others that want to jump in and run validator setups through that transition.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. And target is a week from today, so configs on Monday.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Great. And I guess what we would like, if possible, is client teams to have their eye on it, and if something goes wrong, treat it like a fire drill.
Yeah, and I guess even more than that, like what we did during 1559, which I think was useful, is just having client teams also like straight up like monitor a node, like to make sure even if your node doesn't crash, like is like memory usage, block processing time, like just like our like average, metrics kind of tracking what you'd expect them to be during the transition.
The shadow forking mainnet, it says, do we need to deploy a deposit contract? So yeah, we could reuse the existing deposit contract and change the Genesis fork ID, but that's not going to allow us to actually add any deposits. I would suggest that we use the ERC20 variant of the deposit contract, where there's an owner that can issue ERC20 tokens. And by default, you just pre-populate the Genesis with validators, so you don't actually need to be sending mainnet transactions, but we can send a few to get some deposits in after the fact.
Wouldn't reusing the mainnet deposit contract, the existing one, be really, really dangerous? Because basically you would like have to sign with your live keys on the shadow fork.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of reasons, and we also don't control like any of those validators.
Yes.
No, but if we reuse the mainnet deposit contract and change the deposit ID, then all the mainnet
they're
validators are
invalid.
just invalid.
Right. But then
Exactly. So it's just our Genesis set, but then you need 32 ETH.
yeah, you
at the
need 32
onboarding,
ETH,
which
and you'd be burning that ETH. No
Yeah.
one would. No one would cover that for you. If possible, I'd recommend we just use the ERC21.
yeah, I
So
think
that
that's
we
a
can at least
better
get a few
idea.
deposits in there.
Yeah.
I had a dream that the gas prices were 3 Gwei. I just realized. Is that true? Is that where we're at? Sorry.
On Gordy, they are.
Okay. 35. Okay. I had. Okay. A man can dream. Okay. So let's do that for the mainnet shadow fork in a couple of weeks. I think one of the very important things is to monitor all those metrics, the network-wide metrics that we want to see. No missed slots, that kind of stuff. Make sure there's actually, the mainnet activity is being ported over, because this is beginning to look like a very real load test. But we also, not just the metrics, but I think the network-wide metrics, but I think it'd be really important to monitor system usage of different client pairs. I think we can estimate that it's going to look like the sum of mainnet today, but it's good to see if anything unexpected shows up there, weird CPU processing or memory bloat that we haven't seen on some of these smaller testnets. Okay. Other Kiln merge testing related items?
Yeah, we have a nightly CI with kurtosis now, where every single client pair is a majority client. There are naturally a lot of combinations, and it's getting a bit hard to keep track of what's broken where. So it would be great if client teams could also look in and just have a look at your client and see what's broken. If someone needs access to rerun a job or something, I can add you to the repo.
If the client release a new commit or a new Docker image, what's the best way to push that to the 90 build? Do we just clean it?
Yeah, that can be one way. You can make a PR, or if you're always going to push from the same branch, I can just have a tag /nightly build, like :nightly build or something, and then it'll just pick up the latest version from that tag, whichever way you guys prefer.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I will DM you offline.
Perfect. And the same thing applies for every client team. I think I sent a list of which strategy I'm using for which client team. Just sanity check it, and if you want to change it, then like a couple of you have pinned versions, a couple of you have latest, couple master. Just have a look and let me know what you guys think.
Cool, and that's been running for at least a few days, right?
Yeah.
And how does it look?
I think it's happened around 3 times, like 3 nights so far. The first day was just completely broken, but because we had to get kurtosis up to speed. The second day, I think we had all green on guess, and Nethermind was green with 2 out of the 5. And I think the Bezu kurtosis mix still has some issues, so I don't think it's a client team issue. And today's I haven't checked it.
Great work, thank you.
And also, I just want to mention Mario's working on getting some more analytics in so that we can actually see some participation, etc. And I think over the next week, we'd integrate that into kurtosis as well. So we'd have a better idea of when a testnet run is a pass and when it's a fail.
Yeah, one thing Mario was doing was trying to get the head correct and target correct percentages. And that's why I was asking in another channel about if there's an endpoint for this, and I know Lighthouse has one. Do other client teams have a script that they use based off of the common endpoints, or how do they get that data, or is it only coming off of as Prometheus metrics?
We use matrix.
Got it. Okay. Other merge related items?
Just want to give a quick update on where we are at the block tags in JSON-RPC. So we have on the previous ACD call, we have discussed whether to add justified block tag into the list that we already have. We decided not to do this because it would require break and change into the engine API, and also it has a dubious value of adding this tag, as we already have finalized and saved. So by the end of the day, we are going to have earliest finalized save, which will be temporarily set to justified block as a stopgap, and unsafe latest, which is going to be an alias for unsafe and pending. So if yeah, there is a PR to the execution APIs repository. So if people want to discuss anything or propose their own tag or whatever, we'll also discuss the description of these tags there. Please chime in, comment and comment out. Also, one contentious thing there, at least for me, is there is a suggestion to remove latest from the list of tags, but keep supporting it in clients. What worries me a bit is that client implementers may just decide to remove it from the code base and stop supporting it if it will not be in the list. And in the description field, there is the latest with which is marked as deprecated. So yeah, I'm not sure that's this is how it should look like at the end, but probably Mike, I want to champion on that small contentious change. So that's it on this topic.
Yeah, I think that describes it well. I'm of the opinion that I would rather people, you end users who are looking at the docs, I'd rather them not see latest and therefore not start using it, rather than see latest and not read further and realize it's deprecated. And so by not putting it in the list, the only people that will use it will people that already know about it, or read the whole list and then see that it's, or sorry, read the description, see it's deprecated, and then choose to use it anyway. I feel like it's much easier to just make it clear to the 8 dev teams that, hey, please don't remove latest yet, rather than trying to communicate to the thousands of dApp developers.
I'm gonna jump in on that issue. I kind of think it's early in terms of a deprecation warning, but we can have this conversation on I mean, not for the deprecation warning, but for the actual deprecation. But I'll jump in there. Was I just muted? Did anyone hear what I just said?
After I jump in there, you got muted.
Oh, okay. Whoops. Yeah, it was an oversight. The justified, when we thought we were going to add justified, it was an oversight that we didn't realize we were making a breaking API change. So, anyway. Okay. API changes coming. Testing in full force. Productionizing clients. Is there anything else people would like to discuss with respect to the merge? Any unexpected hiccups? Any design questions people would like to share? Any optimistic sync design issues that people would like to bring up?
Well, there is one thing I can mention for Nimbus, which is that parallel to the optimistic sync, we've been playing around a little bit with light client sync. And unless anybody feels it's very wrong to do so, we thought that we'd actually launch the Lippy2P protocol server and gossip, like request response and gossip on Kiln going forwards with our own nodes at least. So what that'll mean is basically that the light client updates will be available on Kiln for anybody that wants to experiment with light clients. Right. And light client sync.
Are you gossiping those, or are those only request response?
There's gossip and request response.
Okay.
So there's a spec, there's a PR up in the consensus spec repo that defines the protocol. What we've done is that we've added a V0 to the topic name gossip, and likewise for the request response protocols. So we've done this obviously because we don't want to pollute the official namespace with pre-release code. Basically, the spec is still up for
Right.
comments and changes and so on. Like it's.
Did we start with
completely
V1 on our
non-binding.
gossip topics?
We stick the fork ID in there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And then we kind of hope that we won't change between forks. But in this particular case, there's both fork and V0 because we felt that
Yeah, okay.
the protocol is not yet sufficiently nailed down.
Great, that's exciting.
It's actually pretty cool. Like we have a client as well. It crashes a little bit, but it's kind of promising to be syncing this way.
Excellent. And this will prime us well for the Light Client Workshop happening in Amsterdam. At the tip of my tongue is to jump in and review a lot of the pending Light Client stuff. We want to get that a bit cleaned up before the workshop next month and have a clear direction from there. But thanks for pushing on all that.
Yeah, there's a question about the PR. I'll dump it in the maybe in the Discord in a bit. I'm not in front of a keyboard right now.
Okay. Merge related items. Merge related concerns. Any merge related topics?
I guess I had a question. Is anyone implementing some way to retrospectively verify terminal block? So I'm asking this because like you could sync through the terminal transition block using optimistic sync, right? But after you sync to the head, do you actually go back and verify the total terminal difficulty? Is anyone working on that or planning to work on that?
Yeah, I think in Lighthouse, we have a PR for that right now.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, Teku is already doing that. So if we go through the terminal while optimistic sync, once we are full in sync, we go back and check the terminal conditions.
And if that fail, I suppose you just panic, right?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't need to double check, but yeah, it's something that you cannot recover at that point. So
yeah, got it. Thank you.
So in that case, the fork choice should start giving invalids, and with the error reason that it is an invalid terminal block. I think this is what the expected behavior should be.
Thank you. Anything else on the merge? Okay. Any client updates? Like in the past handful of weeks, we don't have to do a full round, but if you have some interesting things you'd like to share, by all means.
I should mention that our, I don't call it a post-mortem because nothing died, but our post-incident review for the Teku performance issues last week is up. I've stuck it in the chat if you want to link through to that. So last Tuesday, 9 days ago, around 5 p.m. GMT, about 10% of the network vanished. And I think Teku can take the blame for that. puts a lower bound on our network participation in any case. So it was related to deposit processing. There was also knock-on effects to garbage collection and another knock-on effect to caching of states and state regeneration. So yeah, Preston called it. Yeah, very nice. So you can read all the gory detail if you wish in that review. It took time to diagnose the tip-off notwithstanding, and we didn't want to just get out a hot fix for the immediate issue because it seemed to be under control. We could see the kind of deposit flows coming in and so forth. So we took time to kind of dig down deep into the garbage collection issues and fix everything all the way down. So that is a great improvement. 22.3.2 is out and fixes that issue now.
Thank you. Upgrade your nodes.
I'm curious. Do you have any kind of specific test to make sure that your cache are working correctly and you didn't introduce any regression?
I'll defer to Enrico if you have anything to say on that.
So say it again. So you're saying a specific test for...
So yeah, any kind of test to make sure you don't introduce any regression when you do your caches, because we also have the similar kind of caches, and we had in the past, as Jacek mentioned in the chat, something similar with the GC, and we just want to share like the good practices for regression and spotting those kind of issues.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have in mind at the moment all the tests we implemented around that. Thanks for the heads up. We will have a double check on that and maybe reach you out if something needs to be shared.
Thanks.
Right, and the fundamental question being, caches are critical, but your cache not working correctly still looks correct. From like a CI standpoint, it's hard to actually know if your cache is running properly. Right,
because it doesn't give wrong results, it just forces extra work because we regenerate the states. Right. So it would be a performance issue rather than a kind of cache, a wrong results from the cache issue. Thank you, Ben. Any other client updates people would like to share today?
I can just briefly share two little things that are up in the PR queue on the consensus spec. One is that we waffled a bit back and forth about how to reduce aggregate bandwidth once we reverted back to the old aggregate behavior of ignoring certain aggregates. We found a way to make that a little bit more efficient. So there is the PR 2847 up, which expands on the aggregates that we are allowed to ignore by looking at pure subsets, basically. So if the client has seen an aggregate that is better than the current aggregate that is being gossiped, we can just drop the worst one because the client will already have sent the better aggregate to all its neighbors. I recently extended that to contributions as well on a suggestion from Adrian Sutton. Teku. So that would be nice to get in. It gives quite a nice improvement. We've tested it a little bit here and there. The other one is our beacon blocks by range request. It has a step parameter. The step parameter was thought to be used as kind of like when downloading from multiple clients, you'd sort of interleave the blocks and then apply them to your state in this interleaved fashion, but nobody's really taking advantage of it. What does happen is that in code and pretty much everywhere, we have to bounds check this, and yeah, there's like multiplication going on, and it's just annoying. If nobody's using that stuff, we might as well get rid of it. And there's two reasons for getting rid of it. One is to simplify the code base, obviously. The other reason is that we're discussing for the merge a request between execution and consensus layer, where the consensus layer can fetch execution data from the execution client in order to save space, significant amounts of space, gigabytes of space on the drive. And in an ideal world, we would actually mirror both the range and the root request on the JSON RPC level. So I thought about writing a PR for the API, and in writing that PR, I would really want to not include the step.
Right.
So take a look at that. I don't know if there's anything more to say about those.
Was there, so on 2847, I have reviewed this and I think it makes sense. I was kind of waiting on a bit more engineering to chime in on in case that was inducing weird engineering, tough engineering requirements on the caches, which I don't think it is. On the 2856, does anyone use step right now? Let's see.
So looking through the comments, it was only Teku that responded that they use it in some kind of
Finding
exceptional
common,
case. I think this was discussed out of band, not in the PR. But my understanding was that they were willing to remove that functionality because it wasn't critical. And what's nice is that it's actually possible to deprecate the step in a backwards compatible fashion. So the protocol allows clients to respond with an incomplete response. Basically, if somebody requests 10 blocks, the client is allowed to respond with just one.
Right.
So any step larger than one, the way to deal with that would be to just return one block and that's it, right?
Right.
That's a correct response. So it's still, it doesn't break those existing clients. It's just that they'll be less efficient in those exceptional cases. But I'd really encourage everybody to take a look at this PR and think about how your client, like how existing versions of your clients would react to such a backwards compatibility hack, so that we don't break any user stories here.
Yeah, on our prisms, and we do use the step parameter in the case of extended period without finality, and there are a lot of skip slots. But I've looked at the code, and I think we can like fix it to handle the case where the step value is only one. Just makes it slightly more inefficient.
Thank you, Jacek. I suggest y'all take a look at these. They're pretty simple. I think we just need to kind of have some quick consensus on whether we want to get them in. So please do. And I'll make the rounds to ask for input again, probably in about a week. And no input at that point, I'll assume is generally being okay with it. Okay. Any other client updates? Great. I wanted to give you all a quick update on withdrawals from the consensus perspective. I believe this may have been shared. This is Alex Stokes' meta spec that kind of stitches together what's going on with the engine API, the execution layer, and the consensus layer. On the consensus layer, there are three kind of the core features. One is under 2836, which is a withdrawals, manages the withdrawals queue and does full withdrawals essentially once you're exited and withdrawable. The other is 2855, which is a new operation which changes 0x00 to 0x01 credentials, and this is a prerequisite for doing a withdrawal because you need to have a place on the execution layer for your value to land on the other side. And then I meant to push it up before, I have a branch locally that is the third feature, which is a partial withdrawals mechanism. We've gone back and forth on how we might design this. One was to do an optional election when you make a block. But after discussing some of the advantages and disadvantages here, what I have in a PR coming up today for review is essentially just rotating through anyone that has an effective balance of 32 and has balances in excess of 32 and also has a 0x01 credential on some interval just gets swept for these balances to go into a push style withdrawal. I think this is cleaner. This allows you to do it on an interval faster than block proposal, which is nice, and also allows for those that have a split between the 0x00, or sorry, the active credentials and the withdrawal credentials to ensure that they do get their partial withdrawal and that their partial withdrawals are not held hostage by the active key, which makes the proposal. Anyway, we're definitely the core of that. The 2836 will probably be merged today. The credential change operation will be merged soon, and I'll have this other PR up for review. By merging, I just mean they've been reviewed, they have tests, they are feature complete from a certain perspective, but I would like to get some more eyes on this stuff soon. Any question or comment on how we're doing withdrawals on the consensus layer side in these specs currently?
Is there already a PR somewhere or a proposal on the excess balance scheming?
I have it on a local branch I was developing yesterday. I did not get the PR up yet, but right after this call, I'm going to push it up. It still needs some more tests, but it has it shows the functionality. Okay, and I think one of the other things is in active development, although it's probably set aside a bit right now while we're productionizing the merge, but are there any updates on 4844 proof of concepts or specs or anything people would like to share there?
I haven't made any progress on our end, but I'm hoping to soon in like next couple weeks, just as far as like a proof of concept.
Thanks.
From our end, I have a branch. I am pointed to Proto Lambda's branch as well, which has the right cryptographer, which has the right KZG library. So right now I'm just playing around with the library, getting myself familiar with the KZG operation. And in terms of implementation, I am working on the networking side of things, basically adding the new gossip subnet and also doing some testing around it.
Thanks. Okay. Any other spec related or research related updates for today or discussion points?
So one quick thing, if nobody has anything, we had this proposal on all core devs last week about trying to unify the EIP process across both the execution layer and consensus layer. We're working on an executable spec on the execution layer. And one thing that would be nice is eventually to have also EIPs to propose changes to the consensus layer, so that the community can kind of follow this a bit better. And we're in this weird, awkward spot now for like withdrawals and 4844, where we're like, we have like these meta specs or meta EIPs, which then point to both sides. So we're trying to like harmonize all that. I have a thread in ETH Magicians, and we're discussing this in the EIP editing channel on Discord if people have thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, from my perspective, it enhances our process. You know, it allows us to have a bit more exposition and stitch the things together, and leverages the executable spec that we know and love and write a lot of tests with. So, I think I'm fine with it. I think it's much of a more difficult change on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, for consensus layer people, it basically just means writing up a bit more English bits and putting those in an EIP. Yeah.
I will point out, I think something that is emerging with 4844 and is kind of how withdrawals are working as well, is this notion of using a feature directory rather than a fork directory, while a proposal is independent within the consensus specs, and only when proposals are decided on as these are going to go into an upgrade or a fork together would we then probably merge into a single fork directory. Capella, that's the directory with the withdrawals, for practical purposes is the withdrawals directory. And 4844 is its own directory, you know, and if those were to go into the same fork at that point, I think it makes sense to merge, rather than the way we did with Altair, which was we had a grab bag of different features that were all intertwined during development and discussion. It was kind of hard to parse and look at. I think merging down when you get closer to a fork is probably also difficult, but I think it's more sane from a feature perspective and allows decisions to be made a bit more independently from each other during the design and governance process.
What are your thoughts on just maintaining a PR against the fork? Like, for example, for 4844, I feel like that is something that could just exist as a diff. Yeah, and then rebasing against like new things that change. And then when you have high confidence that it's going to the fork and it's at a place that's acceptable, you merge.
One of the valuable things so there's a couple things there. One of the valuable things of merging is to actually be able to generate test vectors on normal releases, although you could go into that PR branch and generate the test vectors if you wanted to release them early. You know, I merged that after discussions with Proto because there are iterative things to do there, but there's like at that point the conversation was huge. There were lots of different changes, and it just becomes hard to kind of track at that point. And I guess to piggyback on that, withdrawals are these like 3 features together, and so they really, I'm developing them in 3 PRs that piggyback on top of each other, and I guess that works in terms of keeping them as separate PRs, but then I'm having like 3 different places I'm rebasing and stuff, and they kind of intertwine a bit. So from a development perspective, merging earlier is nicer, but I see from like a separation of concerns perspective that could also work well. Is that being considered on the execution side?
Sorry, what?
No, on the execution, the executable execution specs.
Oh.
It's being debated.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think that there's one of the trade-offs is like most EIPs on the execution side don't actually make it onto mainnet, and I suspect over time, as more people might propose stuff for the consensus layer, that'll be true as well. So it's like there's a trade-off between like making sure we actually save the historical record of the EIPs, but then not clutter the spec itself with like spam. Yeah, because if you do save stuff just in PRs, it means it literally only lives on GitHub, and that's not great. And I mean, we've seen literally for Shanghai, EIP 1153 has been like proposed again, which is just based on the number several years old. So you can imagine a world where like that spec would just be gone if maybe it wasn't part of like the EIP repo itself, or much harder to retrieve. So yeah, I think,
right.
Yeah, we do want to keep a copy of like, and I think there's probably something similar to like when an EIP, before an EIP gets merged as a draft, it's also just a PR on GitHub or like in somebody's fork, and that's probably fine. But then once the EIP is actually merged and has a number, then it becomes like a markdown file in the EIP repo, and like at least that's part of the Git repository. So
I believe the tentative plan, from what I understand from Sam's plan at least, is that once someone gets an EIP to some threshold, like draft or whatever, the intent is to keep it as a branch forever, or indefinitely, or until some extreme circumstances are reached. We would not delete them or remove them.
Right, and then you could just pull the master branch or like your own branch if that's what you care about, but at least it's part of the overall Git repository.
Right, but he's saying you would leave it as a separate branch.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's like it doesn't clutter the spec on master, but if somebody just wants to pull the whole repo and make like an archive copy of it, like it's with all the branches, then it's manageable. Like it's still a branch part of the main repo rather than on somebody's fork.
I see. I guess what we often see on the consensus layer side is it gets written, it gets merged, and then you do over time see an iterative small proposal change, or an iterative small bug fix change, or adding a bunch of tests. I guess you could always do that off of a PR of a PR rather than off of what we call dev. But
yeah, I think there might be some confusion here. The idea is that the PRs would still be short-lived. The branches are are long-lived, and so
okay.
So
you have a canonical naming of a branch.
Yeah, there's like canonical naming system for branches, and it's got a hierarchy to it or whatever. But the idea is that the again, I'm trying to represent Sam's proposal here. The idea is that all the text would exist in this executable specs repo, but if it's not yet live in production, then it's just going to be in a branch on that, which is a branch off of master, which is what's in production.
Right, or scheduled for production.
Yes, I think for scheduled for production, there is a special set of branches that are like London and Berlin and whatnot.
Okay.
And so once we have Berlin nailed down, then there'll be a Berlin branch that gets all the EIPs that are in Berlin all merged into one. And then eventually that will then turn into master once it launches.
Yeah, basically, yeah. The for the time bit. Well, I guess the Berlin branch would like grow, right? Like, because we might choose to include like 2 EIPs to start, and then we add the third one, and so for that period of time where we're like adding stuff, it's changing, and like master is still what's on mainnet, and then once we have the actual upgrade on mainnet, then we merge Berlin into master, and in the parallel, there's probably London that's already been opened because we've already started adding stuff to it.
I see. Yeah, I mean, we could be amenable to such a process.
Yeah, to be clear though, none of this is like decided. It's all still
absolutely.
very up for discussion. Yeah, so like getting feedback from you all, and how this would help or hinder what your current process is really valuable.
Anyone else have any other comments on his proposal? Great. Okay. Any other discussion points for today? Okay, great. Thank you. Happy Shadow Fork later today. Please, testing. It is critical. I know you all know that, but it's worth saying out loud. Talk to you all soon. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you.
Bye, everyone.